In this video, I'm going to be replacing some LED turn signals on the back of a WR250R. The bike's already been modified. The signals I'm taking off are not original equipment by any stretch. They're just old, and I've had to replace the front ones because one of them was broke. And I'm just going to try to get them all to match. The signals I'm using are made by a company called DMP. I'm not endorsing them. I don't know if they're worth a shit or not. It's a dynamic moto power, but they look pretty cool. I'm gonna drop the license plate off the bike to give me access to the nuts that are holding the turn signals on it. So that'll be the first thing I'll do here. This bike's just got them on with wing nuts, so don't even need a tool for this. Okay, now I'm gonna pop the seat and the rear fender off the bike. The seat's held on with should be two 10mm bolts right up under the bottom. And we're just doing this to gain access to the wiring. And the fender, you've got your controller here. Just flip that out of the way. That looks like a couple 8mm bolts right here. Just drop down. Another one here. Okay. And that fender should just kind of pull right out of there. And that gives us access to the wiring. So what we'll see once we start looking at the wiring on the turn signal wiring comes up through here. There's no connections here. It comes up through the frame and it routes through, the harness routes along, it's clipped to the frame here, and it runs right up in behind the side panel, and all the connections are up in here behind this right side panel. Now the problem I've got is the new turn signal only comes with about a 6-inch pigtail wire on it. So that wire is not going to run the distance to get to those connections. So I can do one of two things. I can either bail on these lights and order some lights with a specific light rig for a WR250R, or I'm going to have to pull off some type of a splice. And that'll make most guys cringe at the thought of splicing their harness. But that's what I'm going to do, and we're going to do a good job of it and make this work just fine. I'm going to do this one side at a time so we run no danger of crossing wires. First I'll use a wrench and get in and take the nut loose on that old turn signal. Just run that nut off the back. And then at that point, because there is no connection here, we're going to have to clip these wires. So use a pair of wire cutters. I'll clip these wires. Okay. Now after I've gotten that signal clipped off, then I'm going to pull that, fish around a little bit and just pull that one turn signal wire out. Okay, so this is the wire we're working on. Now before I start wiring things up, I'm going to test fit the new turn signal. So I'll lace the wires through the hole in the signal bracket. And what I find is, because this is an aftermarket general purpose turn signal, not really designed for this bike, this shaft is of a larger diameter than the hole in the bracket. So what I'm going to have to do to make this work is I'm going to have to enlarge the hole in that bracket. And how I'll do that is I'll drill this hole. Now whenever you do this, you're going to want to be real careful, because whenever you're drilling sheet metal, your bit can hang and bend the sheet metal. So we do it very gently. Just drill through that hole, and that makes it bigger. Now we'll try it again. We'll lace the wires through the hole. And that goes right in. And we'll go ahead and loosely put the washer and the nut on the back side to hold it still while we work. Okay, I'm not going to tighten that up yet, because after we get the body work on, we'll want to take a look and see where our adjustment is up and down, and get that lined up before we tighten that. So now I'm fishing my wires back up through the frame where the signal wire originally came from, and now we'll do our splice right up here under the fender. So the factory pigtail on the signals came with these these little push-in type terminals, and these are fantastic as long as you've got the other side, the female side, that you can splice onto your original wiring. I don't have that. I'm basically going to use a butt splice. So here I've got a black and a yellow wire, and these are going to my new turn signal. This is the original wire on the bike. And what I'm going to have to do is split the casing on this outer jacket back to expose the red and the black wire in this harness. Now, I'm going to back up on what I said. Now, I said this was original, but it's probably not. This is actually the original wire from the previous set of LED lights. So you could possibly have 3 wires in this if it's all original. Now, there's a lot of different ways you can split this jacket back away from here. I'm using like a little pair of cuticle scissors, just because it reduces the likelihood that I'm going to nick a wire, or even worse, cut myself. So if you're using a utility knife or something like that, be careful. I want to split it back a little ways to give myself some room to work. That's probably more than I need. You could leave this on there out of the way and then bring it back and tape it back over, but today I'm going to be using some heat shrink to try to get that watertight seal around my splice. The next thing I'm going to do is strip the wire back, strip the insulation back a little on these wires. And I would say that's about 1/4 of an inch I'm stripping back. I know these are old school strippers. Not too many people still use this type. I just got used to them when I was younger, and kind of like them. So I'm just stripping those wires back, twisting them a little bit just to keep them nice and straight. Now I'm going to do the same thing. If I could stick that out of the way a little bit of the camera, I'm going to do the same thing to the new wires for the pigtail going to the new turn signal. I don't have quite as much room to work here. Okay, they're stripped back now. I'll twist those a little bit so they're nice, and all the little wires are together and it's nice and ready to work with. Now what I'm going to do I've got some heat shrink tubing, and I'm gonna cut this into a couple lengths, and I'm gonna make them fairly long, maybe a couple inches long. So I'm gonna slip this over the wiring harness like this and get it back out of the way, and then later we'll pull that back over the splice and shrink it. What I'm going to use to splice is a little butt connector. I'm not sure how. See if the camera can focus in on that. Maybe not. It's just a little butt connector. You can get it basically in the electrical supply store. And it just crimps on. And I check every time, make sure I got a nice tight crimp on that. And then I'll put it on the other side. With another butt connector. Make sure the wire's in there fully before I crimp. I crimp, and very nice connections. Now let's talk about color code just a little bit, because on one side I have black and red, and on the other side I have black and yellow. Now, two colors are universally grounds, and that's black and green. If you get a black wire, it's probably ground. Green can sometimes be ground too, but in this case we've got two black wires. They will go together. Those will be the grounds. So we'll stick the black wire from the turn signal into our butt connector. I may have cut that one a little long. We'll see if it'll go in there. Yeah, I mean, maybe not ideal, but it's there. Yeah. And then we crimp it. And we check our connection by tugging on it a little bit. I mean, you don't want to yank on it, but just a firm little tug, and they're on there nice and tight. And now on this application, the red will go to the yellow. Because it's all we got left. And then we'll crimp it. Okay. Okay, now our connections are made, and the signal is wired. In fact, you could flip the bike on now and test it out, and the blinker's going to work. But because this bike is used for 90% off-road, I need to make sure this connection is as waterproof as I can get it. And that's where that heat shrink tubing comes into play that we put on earlier. And I pull it up over my butt connectors. It barely fits. I get that over the butt connectors like this. Now I'm going to use a heat gun to shrink that heat tubing around that splice, to shrink that tubing up and make that nice and waterproof. And I notice here I've got a piece of rubber right on this tab. I'm going to take that off so I don't risk melting that, and I'll put that back on when I'm done. You can see how that heat shrink tubing just shrinks up right around that butt connection, and that helps to seal that against the elements. Now, in the interest of saving time, I'm gonna kill the video, go ahead and do the other side, get it caught up with this one. Now that I've got both of the signals spliced in and everything's pretty much caught up side to side, I've got extra slap in my wires up here. So it's time to tidy up the wiring. I don't want a bundle of wiring up under the fender that could cause problems in an off-road scenario. So what I'm gonna do is pop the side cover off, get up in here and see what we can do to pull some wire this way to get it nice and out of the way. Should just be the one bolt down here holding it on. Just pop that side cover out of the way. And here we can see our wires coming through. And I'll just fish these in. To tighten that up back in here. And now pull these. The extra wire will be going up in behind the side panel rather than, and then I'll cable tie these. Just grab a cable tie. Just hold that wiring in nice and tight up behind that cover. Now we'll take a look back here. So add just a couple small cable ties just to make sure our wiring is nice and drawn up and out of the way. I've not changed the original routing on the wires, right where they started out at. Okay, that's looks like a nice clean install. So now's a good time to test it out. So see, there's right, there's left, perfect. So it's ready to put the bike back together, do the final adjustment on the angle of the turn signals, tighten them up, and the bike's ready to ride. With the bike back together, we just put the fender back on, the side panels and seat. We just make a final adjustment on the angle of the lights. You basically just want these pointed straight backwards so that the cars behind you have every opportunity to see you. And I just put the final tightening on these signals. And they're ready to go. Now we got to do is put a license plate on it and ride the thing.